Good morning, class. Today I'm going to be recording your tests only. So let me turn on my amplifier. Okay, and so you'll have some speed building and then you'll have your test. Okay, so make sure you listen to your speed building before this. Let me give you some proper names for your tests. You have on your number 100, you have St. Mary's, Hilltop House, and Minnesota. And it's a long answer, and the question is, what details did Susan relate? So this is going to be your 100 test, number 1. It's a long answer. And here we go. 5 minutes, 100, number 1. She told me that she had been involved in a serious motorcycle accident in June prior to the year I saw her, which was in 1996. She stated she went through about 3.5 months of hospitalization. She was treated locally at St. Mary's and Hilltop House and then transferred to a hospital in Minnesota for extensive outpatient treatment thereafter, period. Sorry, I think I am dictating sometimes. She said she had seen a psychologist while in the hospital in Minnesota and thought that was helpful. At the time that I saw her, she had been referred by another doctor for complaints of depression, irritability, and difficulty of functioning. He thought that part of her problem might be psychological and wanted an evaluation for that purpose. She told me that since her accident, she felt that her memory was not good as before, and that she had formerly had good memory recall before the accident. She was still aware of some physical problems that she had. She enumerated difficulty in walking, difficulty with her balance, intermittent dizziness, and some difficulty swallowing, as well as difficulty with her speech. She told me that she felt she had noticed a change in her personality. And those were her words, that she now got depressed very easily. She'd often break out crying for minor problems, certainly something she did not do prior to her accident. She had frequent difficulty concentrating and also was prone to get very irritable, and this was most noticeable in dealing with her children. She had had some thoughts of suicide, but had not made actual plans to follow through with this, and was not currently thinking in that manner when I saw her for the first time. Now, in taking her history, I asked about any past psychiatric problems prior to the accident. And she did say she had never seen a psychologist or had any psychiatric treatment. And she was not aware of any psychiatric difficulties in her family. Further, she did tell me she was involved in a lawsuit arising out of the motorcycle accident. Next, I asked her about her daily activities at that time. She said she would usually get up about 9:30. And at that time, she had to soak her leg daily because of recent surgery. She did not do much housework by herself. She really spent much of the time either watching TV or possibly reading magazines for a short time. She again talked about the difficulty in dealing with her children who did not seem to mind her as they had before the accident. She had less control over them. I then asked some questions about her past history, and she told me she was the second of 3 children, that her father had died when she was 21, that she was a graduate of high school and had married shortly thereafter due to pregnancy. Although her ex-husband was still okay. And then we have your second 100 lit. It says no proper names, you all, no proper names. Okay, and so this is going to be 100 number 2 for 5 minutes. Literary. As I was crossing to the center median, I saw the headlights coming, but they seemed really far away. Then, when I was at the curb of the median and ready to step into the street, I glanced up again, and the headlights were a lot closer than before. I was going to step down into the street, but tried to stop myself from doing so. I don't know how to drive, so my perception of what happened may not be accurate, but I thought that the car was going much too fast. When I tried to stop myself, the car appeared in front of me so quickly. I was frozen in place. Then I have kind of a mental image of her body over the car's fender. But when the car went by, I kept on walking, and it took time for it to register in my brain the extent of what had just happened. Everything happened so quickly that I didn't have a chance to grasp it all at once. The woman who got hit had been getting on the bus that had pulled up, and I hadn't noticed her. Because I hadn't even noticed her, after it was over, I felt a strong sense of guilt. I tried to remember what she looked like, and I couldn't visualize her. When a photo of her was posted later, it was then that I remembered how she looked and walked. So she was there, but I wasn't paying attention. I had just gotten out of bed 45 minutes earlier, and I was still sleepy. I was thinking about work. It was another ordinary day, and I was up in my head and not too aware of what was going on around me. Someone mentioned later that she was about 10 feet in front of me. but I wasn't paying attention at that time. I was told that she had gotten about halfway across the street when she saw the car coming and started to run. She tried to run to the other side of the street. She tried to outrun the car. I didn't see any of that for myself, though. This is just what I was told. I have never seen an accident involving a pedestrian before. I kept walking across the street, and when I got to the other side, I decided to use the phone at the post office to call the police. My cell phone battery was dead, but I remembered there was a payphone at the post office. I was running, but then someone shouted at me that the ambulance was already on the way. I walked slowly back and knelt down beside the woman. I wanted to see if there was anything I could do to help her. She was laying in the middle of the street, and she was and then we have your 80 test, so let's get ready for the 80s. 80 number 1, lit, you have Mr. Arch, Drake, 3rd Avenue, Main Street, and Fox. And this will be test 80 number 1 for 5 minutes lit. And it's a long answer, and the question is, please go on about your observation of the chase. And this is the long answer. 80 number 1 lit. As I turned and I was driving my car, I was turning and looking over my right shoulder to try to keep a view of that particular suspect who was running away from me over to the south and to the west. As I was turning and looking at him and still trying to get my car stopped, I heard several gunshots. I don't know how many gunshots I heard, but I believe it might have been 2. I didn't see who fired the gunshots. At that point, because of the gunshots, I was still looking back over my right shoulder. I turned and looked to my left and saw the driver, Mr. Arch, in the red car pulling out of the parking lot directly at me as I was still moving and starting to try to turn into the parking lot. He was driving the car, and I could see that he was alone in the car at the time. I actually saw his face at that time, and it was my feeling that we were going to hit head on. The detective had pulled his car into the lot, and he was almost over to the area where the car had been originally when it was parked. At this point, the red car had driven the width of the parking lot out and was leaving the parking lot and was on 3rd Avenue. The red car was probably a distance of about 100 feet. The car had moved from that point where I first saw it to where it was almost going out of the parking lot. When I looked up again, it was definitely going right out of the parking lot. Then the driver, Mr. Arch, looked at me as I was pulling into the parking lot, and he was pulling out. Then he swerved to the left, and I swerved to the left to avoid hitting him. At that time, he began driving west on 3rd Avenue and then turned south on Main Street. Since I was able to make a turn, I began following him. Then I also put over the radio to the other cars that I was chasing Mr. Arch in the suspect vehicle. Mr. Arch went south on Main Street to Drake, then turned west to Fox. At the intersection of Fox and Drake, he turned north and then immediately west again. And then you have your 80 number 2 lit, words that come out: Central State Hospital, Your Honor, court, self-incrimination. And this will be 80 lit number 2 for 5 minutes. The defendant was charged with 2 counts of burglary, and at his arraignment, he entered a plea of not guilty to each count. At a subsequent hearing, the court listened to the testimony of 2 court-appointed doctors. Based on what he heard, the judge found that the defendant had a mental disease or defect and was not able to stand trial. The judge committed him to the Central State Hospital, where he stayed for about 5 months. It was later determined that the defendant was able to stand trial. At that point, the stenographic transcript shows that the defendant attempted to change his plea to each count from not guilty to guilty. The trial judge questioned him as to his age and education, and the judge advised him of what the possible sentence was for each count. When the judge asked him what he was charged with, the defendant responded with the words, "Burglary in each case, Your Honor." The judge then questioned him about whether anybody had made any threats or promises to induce him to plead guilty. When the judge asked him about some details of the charges, some doubt arose as to his recollection of one of the burglaries. The court refused to accept his change of plea and continued the proceedings to another date. At the next hearing, the judge again asked about any threats or promises to get the defendant to change his plea. The court also asked counsel whether he was satisfied that the plea was being made freely and of his own accord. Counsel said that he was so satisfied. He said that he had gone over it with the defendant numerous times. The court also asked counsel whether he was satisfied that his client understood what the charges against him were and what rights he was giving up by the change of plea. Counsel stated that there was no question about it. The court then explained to the defendant that by entering a plea of guilty to each burglary, he was giving up his right against self-incrimination, that he was giving up his right to a jury trial, and that he was giving up his right to confront his accusers. The defendant said he understood those things. The judge then accepted his plea of guilty in each instance and found him guilty of burglary on each count. The court sentenced. Okay, so that concludes your test, you all. Type one up and make sure you access the speed building prior, okay? Have a great day.